everyone, welcome back to the next of my Warriors of Darkness lore history series. If you haven't watched the part 1 yet, I recommend you go ahead and do that. The link will be down below in the description and at the end of this video if you are interested. But now we will be moving on to part 2, where we begin our look into each one of the Warriors of Darkness from the first separately, how they lived, and just as importantly, what became of them after death. So we'll be doing the first 4 warriors, the stories of Lamitt, Brandon, Renda-Rae, and Nailbert, but we will be waiting until after patch 5.3 before we finish up with Oddbert and Silva. So to start off with, we will be moving on to the first of Oddbert's companions, and that would be the dwarf Lamitt, and I will be calling this video the Compassionate Devout. Lamitt was known as the Devout of Darkness, and also served as the healer for the Warriors of Darkness. When she ventured on the soars with the others, she went under the alias of Lamitt to match more along the lines of naming conventions for Lalafells there. After her death, she was resurrected as the Cardinal Virtue, and she was given the nickname Sophorzine, the name being a virtue of being reasonable and moderate and having self-control, a name meaning temperance or honesty in ancient Greek. Lamitt is a Lalafell, or a dwarf, who is identical in appearance to the female Lalafell from the original version's cutscenes, with only her white mage robes dyed a darker color. After becoming Sophorzine, her appearance was mostly the same, all but her black and red eyes and plaster-like white skin, while she was surrounded by that white glow when she was reborn as a Sin-Eater. Personality-wise, though, she was always seen to be very kind and almost motherly to others. When she was young, she was considered to be strange by her people, for she was much more open-minded to the outside world, though she was still quite proud of her dwarven roots. Despite all that, though, she carried a strong sense of justice and is willing to do whatever it takes to save someone in need, even if it meant going against her village's traditions. She also appeared to have been quite good with handling money because she was the one in charge of keeping an eye on their funds while traveling with Oddbert and the others, often telling the others off for reckless spending. It was said that she served the role of a compassionate mother to the party, always willing to listen to her friends' troubles and comforted them as best as she could. She was also the first to join Oddbert's party, both of them having left their respective homes around the same time, so the two of them had a very special bond since the beginning, and was even stated outright that she had secretly fallen in love with Oddbert and longed for him to return her feelings. And while he did care for her as a friend, it is unknown how deep his own feelings ran for her, though. Lamitt was born as a proud daughter of the dwarves of Tomra, and lived there wondering more and more of the outside world, when a terrible disease called Stoneblight struck the village, where many of her people, including her own sister, were slowly turning to stone. She knew she had to find a cure to save them. Despite this decision, though, nothing that she or any of their other healers could come up with could heal their ailing kin, and soon enough Stoneblight became a highly contagious disease. This forced the healthy dwarves to lock the sick dwarves away deep in the mines below ground and left them there to slowly turn to stone. Not unlike how the people of Nymph locked away the Toneberries and tried to drown the Wanderer's palace. But Lamitt couldn't stand by and watch this happening and left Tomra to find a way to save her people without permission, an act that she knew was all but forbidden. Shortly after leaving, though, Lamitt found Oddbert on the brink of death after he had been ambushed by a horde of hobgoblins and healed his wounds. After seeing how talented she was with healing, he asked her to join him, and that soon began their partnership, and the first 2 of the group that would become the Warriors of Darkness. Soon after that, though, they met other members of their merry band and began to travel all around Norvrot, finding and helping those plagued with trouble. During all this, though, they started to find a pattern, noticing that all of these different instances seemed to be stemming from the same source, the one known as the Shadowkeeper. And Lamitt also begins to wonder if the Shadowkeeper is also the one responsible for Stoneblight and the plague upon her village. But there was no time to really wonder about that. Their journey eventually took them deep into the ruins of Ronka, where Lamitt was able to learn the magic she needed to cure Stoneblight, as well as earned her Crystal of Light. As she hoped, when she next returned to her village, she was able to cure all those affected with Stoneblight. But surprisingly, their elder was far from happy. Instead, he was furious with her for her actions, both for her leaving their lands without permission and for consorting with outsiders, and so he exiled her for her troubles. Oddbert was the first to defend her and her actions, but the elder refused to listen to him before Lamitt accepted her fate. She confessed that she was aware that this would be the possible outcome for her decision to help her people, and she accepted the elder's decision. Up until that moment, Lamitt had always worn her helm as the traditional way of the dwarves. So until that moment, none of her friends had ever even seen her face. but it was for the first time that she cast it aside and discarded her past. However, she didn't leave alone. Her sister and all those formerly afflicted with stone blights, unable to bear the injustice of this, chose to leave with her, and this would be the last time that any of them would return home. Lamitt is seen later by the cliffs as she looked over the ocean, and Oddbird arrives to comfort her. He wanted to go back and find something to say to help to get them to understand, but she told him to let the matter go since their job was far from done, and they needed to stay focused on slaying the Shadowkeeper anyway. Oddbird agrees to let it go for her sake, but he does comfort her and say that she was glad she was there with them, with or without her helm. It's hard to say for sure, but it does seem to be here that Lamitt's feelings have grown for him, or at the very least she did come to realize how deep those feelings went. After that, she and the others continued their journey to hunt down the Shadowkeeper, never realizing that their enemy was right there in their midst the whole time. But eventually, the truth came out, and Silva revealed herself to be the Shadowkeeper, and how she allied herself with the Ascians. She battles with them, hoping that they would kill her, yet with Oddbird sparing her life, unable to bring himself to kill her, her plans ultimately failed. Instead began a new journey for them, to hunt down the Ascians who they truly believed to be the ones behind all of this, Mitron and Lodrif. They fought the Ascians and won, but in the end their deaths caused such an imbalance that they accidentally triggered the Flood of Light. Desperate to save their world, Lamitt joined the others when approached by Elidibus and agreed to journey to the source to trigger another calamity, and hoped to spare their world the pain of becoming a light-aspected version of the Void. However, they were told that to do this meant sacrificing their corporeal forms, leaving them as souls and free to travel between the shards. In the end, Lamitt agreed with her friends and offered up her life to the man she loved as he was forced to cut them all down and secured safe passage for them to the source. Elidibus's plan of course worked, and they arrived on the source, where they were instructed on what to do next. Elidibus told them to sow the seeds of chaos by slaying primals and having the beast tribes resort to summoning ever more powerful primals for protection. If this kept up, they believed that another calamity would be triggered, and thus allow their world to return to death and ether to be spared from becoming a light-filled void. And that was how a famed warrior of light from the first became the warrior of darkness on the source. And to blend in with this familiar yet unfamiliar world, she took up the name of Lamimi during her short time here. They eventually came to blows with the Scions and the Warrior of Light of the Source, but failed to kill them. Before they could escape though, Urianji's plan came to fruition as he had used their crystals of light to secure a meeting with the Word of the Mother, their Minfilia, who agreed to come to the First to prevent the Flood from swallowing up anything else. After meeting with Minfilia and returning to the First to hold the Flood, Lamitt sacrificed herself and lent her strength to the Oracle, and it is largely there that her story ends. At least until years later when her body was recovered and she was resurrected as one of the cardinal virtues, Silverzine. Even in death though, her instinct to heal and save those exiled dwarves remained, and she traveled the land, healing those same dwarves who were caught up by the Flood and transformed into Sin Eaters. This continued for a few years until the Warrior of Light from the Source arrives in Norvrant and joins the hunt with another dwarf named Giot, who was tasked with slaying Silverzine. During this, the pair learns of Lamitt's past and of her sacrifices, and Giot comes to realize that Lamitt wasn't the monster that everyone thought her to be. However, the biggest problem with trying to slay Silverzine was that she kept healing herself. And after much thought, they came to realize that the reason that she was healing herself was because she didn't have a helm, and so she was healing all the unhelmed Sin Eaters. And that's when they came up with a plan that by forcing a helm on her head, they may be able to prevent her from healing herself. We later learned that Giot was actually a descendant of the same dwarven who first banished Lamitt, and yet she came to understand Lamitt's feelings and understand her reasons for why she did what she did, and thus was determined to help set her free. She even sacrificed her own helm to give them a fighting chance. Like they hoped, the helm prevented Silverzine from healing herself during the course of the battle. After Silverzine lay there defeated and her body dissolved into light, she left behind something. Her damaged crystal of lights, which caused a manifestation of Lamitt's memories to appear before them. Giot tries calling out to her, but this turns out to be just a memory of the woman Lamitt had once been, and therefore could not answer back. Still, her words made it clear how she truly felt about leaving her home behind. But she knew that tradition wouldn't have been able to save anyone, not least of all her sister and the others, and she did what she felt was right. While she did not regret her decision to leave, and then come back later on with the cure, she did lament how it all ended. But she at least came to accept her choices and was at peace with them, knowing that her sacrifices weren't in vain. The only regret that she had left was that she never told Odbert how much he meant to her before she faded from sight. Lamitt's tale largely does end there, though it is shown that after Emix-Selk's defeat, her spirit was there waiting with the rest of her comrades as Odbert's spirit finally joins them, and she is reunited with the man she loved. With the truth finally made known to the world of the First of her tale and the events leading up to the rise and halt of the Flood, Lamitt is finally being looked upon as more of a tragic hero than a villain. And even her own kin are, at last, recognizing her for the noble woman that she had once been. And despite her small body, she had the largest heart of them all. Alright everyone, that's it for right now. What did you all think? Out of all the stories, I found hers to be the most touching, and I remember my heart breaking when I learned her tale. And it was so good to know that her story is slowly being told thanks to the Warrior of Darkness, Gialt, and all those who do know the truth. So hopefully one day she will be remembered as a compassionate healer who only ever did what she thought was right. Her story really touched me because Lamitt shows us what's the best of us. She shows us the power of unconditional love and how one must be ready to fight tooth and claw for those that you care about. Perhaps my favorite of all the stories that we've heard so far. Anyway, that will be it for Lamitt's tale. Please join me in next Tuesday when I will be discussing the next member of the Warriors of Darkness. I will be uploading a video for every Tuesday of this month, getting through the 4 warriors involving Lamitt, Brandon, Renda-Rae, and Nailbert. But that will be it for now. We have several more stories to tell, but until then, if you have a request on who you would like to see next, please drop a message down below and let me know why that is. So until next time everyone, have a good rest of your day and talk to you soon.